Hello everybody, this is Past Perspectives. Welcome back to a brand new video. And in this video, I'm going to be making my final prediction for the 2024 presidential election. Now, as you know, this is only my second prediction that I've ever done, and this was my last prediction. Now, many of you were making fun of this prediction in the comments, but this is 100% what I believe, and a lot has changed since then. So, I'm going to be making a new prediction, and again, I will not be using lean, tilt, or likely, mostly because this is an election like 1960 or 1992, where almost every state is going to be close and competitive. So, with that out of the way, let's get into this video. So, let's start with the West Coast. I think that California is going to go red, mostly because it has a very high Mexican American population, and Mexicans tend to be the most Republican voting group out of all the Latino populations, and they've been moving very far to the right lately. In fact, a poll released by a university showed that California Hispanics moved roughly 30 points to the right from 2020 to 2024. Kamala Harris has also struggled with Hispanics in her run for Attorney General, as well as her run for Senate back in 2016. And Mexicans have been moving very much to the right lately, and they've become the most Republican, Latino, or Hispanic group. And because of the very high Mexican population of California, I believe that California goes Republican. Not only that, but also because of the fact that back in 2022, Republicans outperformed there by 13 points, and they just need to outperform by 16 points relative to 2022, and they flipped the state. So, yeah, I think California is going to go red this time around. Same thing with Oregon, because Republicans almost flipped the governor election there in 2022. They did 14 points better than the presidential election from 2020 to 2022. So just 14 more points, and they flipped Oregon, which is pretty easy for them. So I think Oregon goes Republican. Same thing with the state of Washington, because I believe there is a pretty popular Republican running for governor in Washington, and I think his coattails are going to help Donald Trump get over the finish line in the state of Washington. In the state of Nevada, I think that goes red. Also, again, very high Latino population there that is moving very much to the right, and this is true in Las Vegas. I think Clark County is going to flip Republican this election cycle, and I think the Republicans are going to win Nevada by a pretty convincing amount this time. However, the state of Arizona, on the other hand, I think goes to the Democratic Party. The reason why this happens is because even though all the Latinos in Arizona are going to vote Republican this cycle, all of the former John McCain voters there are going to be voting for Kamala Harris. In fact, I believe Jeff Flake endorsed Kamala Harris, and he was one of the most popular senators in Arizona history. So his endorsement is likely going to get Kamala Harris over the finish line in the state of Arizona. In the state of Utah, Mitt Romney has declined to endorse Donald Trump, and the Mormons there who voted for Mitt Romney enthusiastically in 2012 and 2018 are now going to vote for Kamala Harris, especially since there are many non-Mormons also who are very liberal who are moving into Utah. And this coalition of liberal non-Mormons and never Trump Mormons are going to make Utah become a blue state. Blue Utah will become reality in 2024. And there's also a lot of Mormons in Arizona, which is another reason why I think Arizona goes blue this cycle. The state of Idaho also has a huge Mormon population, so that also is going to go blue. Wyoming, Liz Cheney, who has a lot of political influence there, has endorsed Kamala Harris, so Wyoming is going to go blue. The state of Montana, John Tester's coattails are going to help get Kamala Harris over the finish line in the state of Montana. In the state of South Dakota, Kristi Noem's book where she talked about shooting her own dog, that probably upset a lot of her constituents in South Dakota who are now going to vote for Kamala Harris. North Dakota has a very high Native American population. Therefore, if they all just turn out and vote, Kamala Harris would win the state of North Dakota. And she has proved to be very strong with these kind of minority voters. And in the state of Nebraska, Nebraska's second congressional district, and I think all three districts as a whole are going to go Democrat. While there has been talk about the people in Nebraska's second congressional district being outraged over the attempt to split up to make the state winner take all, What about the other congressional districts? I'm pretty sure that the 1st and the 2nd congressional districts are also very unhappy about this effort to combine all of their votes into one. And with all 3 congressional districts voting blue, I think the entire state of Nebraska as a whole is going to go blue. Colorado, also, you saw 2022, they elected a Democrat governor. They shifted roughly 17 points to the left. They just need to do that again, and Democrats win Kansas pretty convincingly. Oklahoma. Republicans actually came pretty close to losing the governor election there, and there's a really high Native American population in Oklahoma. I think Oklahoma governor shifted about 22 points to the left from 2020 to 2022. That same shift again, and Oklahoma flips blue. Texas. This one is interesting because keep in mind, even though Beto O'Rourke lost to Greg Abbott by a pretty convincing amount in 2022, Greg Abbott still did worse than his 2018 performance in the state. And 2018 was a blue wave, and 2022, while not a red wave, was still a much better environment. So if you look at the total trend of Texas from 2018 to 2022, Greg Abbott did terribly. And many of the Tejanos in the Rio Grande Valley, for some reason, they voted for Trump last time. I think they got tricked. This time around, they're going to vote again for Kamala Harris. Tejanos, unlike other Mexicans, are a very Democratic voting bloc. So I think the Tejanos in the Rio Grande Valley, as well as Democrat gains in Austin, which has grown even more since the last decade, as well as Houston and Austin, are going to make Blexus a reality. And then the state of Alaska, Democrats elected a representative there, and that is definitely going to go blue. Hawaii. Tulsi Gabbard has a massive amount of influence in Hawaii, and the wildfires also, and because of her endorsement of Trump, Trump is definitely going to win Hawaii. New Mexico, again, very large Mexican population, although they're not very blue Tejanos like in Texas. New Mexico tends to have the most Republican Mexicans of all, even though Mexicans as a whole tend to be a very Republican voting bloc. New Mexico Mexicans are the most Republican. Plus, these growing shifts are going to make New Mexico flip red. Colorado. This one is not talked about enough, but even though Republicans have been getting decimated there recently, keep in mind, Colorado is the whitest of the southwestern states of New Mexico, Arizona, Nevada, and California. And all of these white voters are not Mormon, meaning unlike the other places in the Southwest, such as Arizona, Utah, or even Idaho, which is in the Pacific Northwest, Colorado is going to go red. Okay, so we finished the West. Now let's go to the South. The state of Arkansas, this one probably goes blue. Same with much of the Deep South, largely because you have a black woman running for the office of President of the United States. This is going to energize black turnout all around the board in the South. Plus, keep in mind the fact that black women tend to be much less energized than black men when it comes to coming out and voting. That's why the South wasn't strong for Obama back in 2008, because only black men decided to show up and vote, and black women largely stayed at home. However, this cycle, with Kamala Harris at the top of the ticket, it appears that black women are going to vote in droves for Kamala Harris, and this is a very low propensity voting group, and black men are already high propensity and are voting for Kamala Harris, so the South is going to go blue once again. The state of Kentucky. Kentucky elected a Democratic governor in 2023, believe it or not, and this is just 1 year later. So, of course, they are going to elect Kamala Harris. Plus, Andy Beshear, who is the governor, is actively campaigning for Harris. State of Indiana. Mike Pence has decided not to endorse Donald Trump. That is a huge blow to the Trump campaign, and many Indiana voters value Mike Pence's sentiment and are going to vote exactly the way he is. And even though Pence has said he is not voting, it is pretty clear who he actually intends to vote for, and that is Kamala Harris. And the rest of Indiana is going to follow his lead. The state of Illinois. So Illinois has had a huge crime outbreak lately, especially in Chicago, which has caused the city to move very much so to the... Sorry about that. Illinois has moved very much so to the right because of the massive crime in Chicago. And Illinois almost elected a conservative Democrat governor back in its governor election in 2023. So I think Chicago is going to flip red, and with it, the rest of Illinois will as well. However, the state of Iowa, recently a Stelter poll has been released in Iowa, which has Kamala Harris winning it by 3, and Stelter has been accurate in literally every single election. So it'll be accurate this time around, and Iowa will go to Kamala Harris. State of Missouri. This one is actually pretty interesting because it's very close to Kansas, and it could be manipulated by Kansas's very much leftward trend. Plus, Missouri has tended to be a bellwether in recent years, so I'll categorize Missouri last, and I'll see who after I categorize the rest of the states, I'll categorize Missouri last. So, state of Minnesota. Tim Walz is from Minnesota. However, he didn't really do so well in his 2022 governor run there, which makes me think he's kind of unpopular in the state. Plus, Republicans have been making inroads there, but at the same time, like, come on, they haven't won it since, like, 1972, so I think Dems win Minnesota. Same thing with Wisconsin, because it's pretty close to Minnesota, and I think Tim Walz his influence in Minnesota is going to carry over to Wisconsin. Forget what I said earlier, I was wrong. Tim Walz is very popular in Minnesota, and his popularity is going to extend to Wisconsin also. And then in the state of Michigan, Michigan is going to go blue, mostly because J.D. Vance is from Ohio, and Ohio State and Michigan, they've got like a huge rivalry going on. So Trump's pick of Vance is probably going to upset a lot of people from Michigan who are now going to vote for Harris because of that. Now we go to the state of Ohio. Ohio, I think, actually goes blue this time because J.D. Vance, he actually didn't do so well again in his 2022 run there. He underperformed by a couple of points, and he wasn't really that well received in many of these working class parts of Ohio. Plus, also Sherrod Brown is on the ballot, and he's going to carry Donald Trump, Kamala Harris to the finish line, which is also kind of similar in North Carolina, where Josh Stein is going to carry Kamala Harris to the finish line. And then you see the state of Florida. Florida is interesting mostly because, again, Cubans and Puerto Ricans, I don't think they're the most democratic Latino voting group, and they're a huge portion of Florida's electorate. So I think because of that, Florida is going to go blue. And with that, Democrats win the presidency. And because Missouri has literally gone the exact way as a winner in every presidential election, except for like the last 4, that still doesn't matter. It's been very accurate in the past. So I think Missouri goes blue this time around. And the state of West Virginia, it's very close to Kentucky and Ohio. So I think Sherrod Brown and Andy Beshear, they're going to kind of influence it. Plus Joe Manchin is there. He hasn't really publicly endorsed Harris yet, but it's pretty clear who he's voting for. So because of Joe Manchin's influence, West Virginia is going to go blue. So the state of Virginia, this one actually goes red, mostly because, again, Glenn Youngkin is from the state. He won it back in 2021. He's actively campaigning for Trump. So Virginia is definitely going to flip red. Same thing with Massachusetts because of Charlie Baker. He won the state even though he hasn't publicly endorsed Donald Trump. Plus, this whole area of New England is very white, and it's got a huge portion of white voters there. And white voters as a whole, they vote something like 58 or 60 to 40 for the Republicans. So the same thing is going to go on in New England. New York shifted massively to the right from 2020 to 2022. Same shift is going to happen this time around, and New York is going to flip red. The state of New Jersey is close to New York, so the influence from New York is going to come over to New Jersey. Plus, there are polls which showed that Joe Biden was close to losing New Jersey, and even polls that showed him losing it. So it'd be reasonable to expect Donald Trump to win New Jersey against Kamala Harris. And same thing with Delaware. Delaware, the people there are mad that Joe Biden was taken off the ticket, that he got cooed by the Democratic establishment. So they're all going to now come out and vote for Donald Trump out of spite. And that includes Joe Biden also, who is definitely voting for Donald Trump. Same thing in Maryland, where Larry Hogan endorsed Donald Trump. And in Maine, Democrats there, they threatened to do the same thing that Republicans in Nebraska did. So understandably, voters there are going to be pissed at them. So they all are going to vote for Donald Trump. Plus, Maine is 90% white or something like that. So if Trump just carries 60% of white voters there, which he will do easily, he will win the state of Maine. And Washington, D.C. D.C. has a huge African-American population, and unlike African-Americans in the South, African-Americans in D.C. have largely been politically disengaged, and white voters in D.C. have been more politically engaged, and they have tended to support Republicans. So Washington, D.C. is going to go Republican. And that leaves with the state of Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania, more likely than not, is going to go blue, probably because of the fact that, again, there is a very large working class population in Pennsylvania. And plus, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, they voted pretty much the same way every election since, like, I don't know, 1984 or something. So, same thing this cycle. If Harris wins Michigan and Wisconsin, she's going to win Pennsylvania also. So, there we go. This is my updated 2024 final prediction. Harris has 316. Trump has 222. Make sure to like this video down below and subscribe to the channel. Past Perspectives, out.